We're back once again with Club Talk Hurling. Myself, Shane Stapleton and Michael Verney with me here, brought to you by Slattery Sullivan Insurances in Nina. If you want to get a new quote for motor, home, farm, commercial, whatever it is, call 067 56705 and get 10% off all new business quotes with the reference code OurGame. Michael Verney, no better place to start than in the Clare semi-finals this weekend. Ballyhale are against O'Callaghan Mills, and we'll get to Ballyhale and Tony Kelly and the rest of it. But Davy Fitz, he's trying to shut down the man that made him, in a way, Shane O'Donnell, the guy who made sure he won that All-Ireland in 2013. It's a tasty enough fixture. Like these teams, it's their third meeting in the last 12 months, and last year in the quarter-final, 6 Mile Bridge had it all to do to beat them, finally saw them off 316 to 119. But this is a decent Éire Óg team who are at the stage of the semi-finals for the first time since 2003.
Yeah, and they're after coming maybe kind of a longer route as well, having had to wait with that Cratloe game, and they've kind of been not delayed, but they're actually probably coming in a perfect position, providing they didn't pick up any injuries or anything last weekend. They're coming in a great position, and as you says, it's kind of Davy versus O'Donnell in many respects. So Davy's going to have to try and shut down, the threat of Shane O'Donnell, who is predominantly seems to be playing out centre forward for Éire Óg. So maybe it's a different type of threat. But with someone like him, there's always he can always easily go in corner or easily go in full forward, and he can easily change the kind of demographic of a forward line. So it'll be interesting there. As we said before, 6 Mile Bridge have a fairly star-studded backroom team with Davy and his coach and Saoirse Bulfin helping him out and Tim Crow as manager. But as I said, Éire Óg are no slouches at all, and have pushed them very, very close in recent years. There's only been a score or two between it invariably over the last while. So they will fancy their chances, and they are coming in full of momentum. They had a good win last weekend. Not comfortable, but a definitely confidence building win. And it's going to be tight. I don't see much more than a score or two between it again.
Yeah, and they beat Fecal, who you mentioned there, and it was only a late goal from Fecal that kind of made it look a bit closer than it probably was. And we mentioned Shane O'Donnell, who of course is an exceptional talent, and if you get enough ball in his hand, worst case scenario, you're going to win some frees. But also in the team is David Reedy, who's been back in the Clare panel this year, really good at working the ball around the field, just tasty stick man, very elusive, good free taker as well, as we know. Liam Corrie has been a Clare panellist for a while. Danny Russell's very he's putting up scores most days. And then 6 Mile Bridge, they beat Broadford in the quarter final. And when I was looking back at the highlights of that game, I was just thinking how many players they have that are quite comfortable on the ball. Like Shane Golden, who had a very, very good league in 2019, I think it could have been 2018. Alex Morey in full forward, he's a good target man, takes the frees. Shane Amori has incredible pace coming from the back line. And then Jamie Shanahan was playing in the inside forward line. A couple of years ago, he was wing back for Clare and looked really good. I think injuries since. So they have a nice spread of really good players who are comfortable on the ball.
No, they definitely do, yeah, and they play a kind of a style that suits them as well. They had much more nous than Broadford in their quarter-final match. Broadford were kind of wasteful up front. In fairness, 6 Mile Bridge, they're a typical Davy side. They're well structured. They're not going to concede big scores. They're not going to concede, a 4-12 or a 4-13. They're not going to be hit with loads of sucker punches or anything like that. They might concede 17 or 18 points, but rarely a goal, and rarely more than one goal. And they usually put up a big score at the other end. As you says, Jamie Shanahan, who missed a lot with Clare earlier on this year, back to fitness, usually good for 3 or 4 points up front. The Morey's obviously very, very solid as well. They've a big fella midfield as well, Paddy Cunningham, who was brilliant the last season. About 6'5" or 6'6", but really, really mobile. Doesn't look like the most athletic runner because of his size, but really, really effective around the middle of the field as well.
Is that the man who was wearing 21? Was it Fitzpatrick or Cunningham? I think Dalo was talking about how he wouldn't normally be scoring them, and he got multiple points in that game.
Yeah, he got a couple of points the last day. Yeah, he's a big he doesn't look like he'd be out around the middle of the field. He looks like he'd be in full back maybe, or corner back or something like that. But again, a very, very effective player. They have their system fairly down to a T, in fairness. They're not going to be exploited too much. It'd just be interesting, if Éire Óg were able to get a couple of goals, particularly if O'Donnell was planted in around the edge of the square, if O'Donnell even got a few balls out around centre forward, or really got a few balls, and they're able to break that kind of defensive line and upset them. I think that the thing with the Bridge is, I was chatting to Owen Kelly recently about tips tactics coming into the 2010 final against Kilkenny, and the talk always was from a lot of pundits, you have to stay with Kilkenny, and he said that Eamon O'Shea kind of said, why don't we try and put them on the back foot? Why don't we try and put them chasing the game, see what they're like chasing the game, have them chasing a 5 or 6 point lead? And it'd be interesting if the Bridge were put on the back foot like that and they were chasing the game. They usually always have teams just at arm's length, and it's very frustrating for their opposition. But it'd be interesting to see if, not that they had to abandon their tactics, but if they were left chasing the game, like, would they still be cool enough to be taking points from long range, or would they be panicked into maybe, trying to orchestrate a goal if they were 4 or 5 down? So, like, to me, it's the sort of game, if the Bridge start off well, I don't see them being headed. I think they're the sort of team where you're going to have to get a lead on them, you're going to have to get a start on them. If you're not, like, if you're level after the first water break, it's probably, Bridge are probably going to be a point or two up at half time and maybe just pull away by 5 or 6 and kill the game. It'd be really, really interesting if Ennis were, 4 or 5 up at the first break, or 4 or 5 up at half time, and were able to hit them with a couple of sucker punches.
Yeah, and I mean, that's obviously what they're going to be looking to do, but I think 6 Mile Bridge, they just have comfortable players in too many positions. They've got a goalkeeper, very solid, Derek Fahey, obviously involved at the county before. He got a point from play against Broadford. He came out and collected the ball, burst out and drove it well over from, I think, possibly inside his own 45. So I'm just going to go with 6 Mile Bridge there, which isn't exactly pulling up trees in terms of making a prediction, but it's hard to look past them. The other one then, Ballyhale against O'Callaghan Mills. You can't but go for Ballyhale here, but Gary Brennan, he might be a bit of a doubt.
Yeah, we played Ballyhale a couple of weeks ago in a challenge game, and I went to college with Gary actually, and I didn't get to chat him after, but I saw him over in the far sideline on crutches. He had went over in his ankle in a football game the Friday night with Clonagad. That'd be the football side of Ballyhale, and he was going for a scan that Wednesday, and I saw quotes even from Colin Collins during the week just saying that it looks like his club season is over, because they were asking him basically would he be available for the county. So, like, if he's missing, he'd be a massive loss. You're looking at 3 or 4 points. Had got the kind of off the shoulder running down to a tee, and he was bursting through defenders, and that would be a big thing for O'Callaghan's Mills, not to have to worry about him. So I'm sure they probably know in Clare whether he's going to be playing or not at this stage, but if he's not playing, he just takes a bit of focus off Tony Kelly and maybe off Niall DC as well. So he would be a massive loss, and it mightn't be this day that he'd be missed most. It would probably be in a county final, and probably against the Bridge that he'd be missed most. But it definitely evens the playing field a little more with O'Callaghan's Mills, definitely. And like they have like plenty of names that we know of. Obviously, Pat Donlan was captain when Clare won the All Ireland in 2013. You have Conor Cooney as well. You have his younger brother Gary up front. Colin Crane, Brian Donlan, who's I think a younger brother of Patrick as well. Dulloch O'Donnell manages them. Did a good win over Ina Kilnamona in the quarter final, and like they're no slouches. I still think even without Gary Brennan, Ballyhale would get over them. It'd be interesting to see how they're going to try and shut down Tony Kelly. Obviously, Pat Donlan kind of played that sweeper role sometimes with Clare and played it really, really effectively. I wonder will he be sitting in front of Conor Cooney, maybe a full back, and will they play 7 defenders and try and keep themselves in the game? But I'd still say Ballyhale would just have a bit too much for them, even without Gary Brennan.
Yeah, and I think Ballyhale have shown in the past that even if they're missing some players, they can find replacements to step up, and I think nothing highlighted that more than the team that got to the All-Ireland final in 2017. A couple of years later, they had lost 6 or 7 players, and despite that, they went on and they won a Munster title anyway. So they've clearly shown that they've got strength and depth. So I presume we're both going for Ballyhale there. The Kilkenny semi-finals, they're on this weekend. Now, I've already done a preview this week with Adrian Ronan, which you can get on our game.ie, the former Kilkenny hurler, and Greg Ballycallan man. So have a look at that. But we'll certainly talk about it also. And just to recap on the quarter-final results, Ballyhale battered Clara 4-18 to 11 points. James Stephens, who they'll play this weekend, they saw off Mullinavat 121 to 116. Dixborough beat Bennett's Bridge out the gate 327 to 214. And O'Loughlin Gales 214 to 10 points winners over Erin's Own. So Ballyhale against the Village, Dixborough against O'Loughlin's. First time I've chatted with you about it. Which of these 2 games do you think is more likely to be a firecracker?
I'd probably say Dixborough and O'Loughlin's, just based on, like, you could throw a towel over the 2 of them over the last couple of years. There's really been nothing to separate them. They've drawn the last 2 league finals, albeit Dixborough won after extra time last year and won after extra time and penalties this year. Dixborough actually beat them in the 2017 semi-final en route to winning that county title, their first county title in a good while. O'Loughlin's will probably think that they owe them one, and they're very, very evenly matched. 15 on 15, very, very evenly matched. I just think it's the bench that maybe will push Dicksboro over the line. If you look at it even last day, Martin Gaffney, who started in that 2017 final, he came on the last day, hit 3 points. He's a great fella to have coming on. Conor Doheney, I think, is their captain, and he was injured and hasn't been able to win his place back. So he's a very good player to be coming on as a sub as well. And I think O'Loughlin's have a couple of injuries from what I believe. Conor Heary, who is a proper prospect for Brian Cody over the coming years. He's training for the cadets at the moment, and I believe he wasn't let out. They only find out whether he gets out for matches and things like that on the morning of the match. So I believe he wasn't let out the morning of the quarter final. I'm sure they'll be pushing and trying to get strings pulled to make sure he's out the morning of the semi-final. But even if he is, I'm sure he's in the middle of a heavy kind of training regimen at the moment, and getting out the morning of a match and not knowing whether you're coming or going is probably not great for his head, and probably not great for the teams as well, because they have a plan probably with him and a plan without him. And then I think Robbie Buckley, who we talked about in this show a couple of weeks ago, has a hamstring injury that he picked up, and he didn't feature last weekend. And Keith is out as well with an AC injury to his shoulder. So I think on the balance of things, I'd be favouring the Borough, particularly with the score that they put up. They put up a monster score against a good Bennett's Bridge side. So I'd be favouring the Borough here.
Yeah, well, O'Loughlin's only conceded 10 points the last day. Dicksboro scored 327. So you're looking at a fairly potent attack against a mean enough defence if you're to just go on those 2 games only. But which team is more likely to shut down the opposition attackers? Killian Buckley's back in form, obviously, with Dicksboro playing really, really well. But on the other side, you do have Kilkenny's 3 and 6 in Hugh Lawler and Paddy Deegan, so they'll be feeling fairly good about themselves.
Definitely, yeah. Like it's like the Borough have a good defence and O'Loughlin's have a good attack. It's a funny kind of one. As you said, O'Loughlin's 3 and 6 and definitely be trying to shut down the likes of Bill Sheehan, and even Aidan Nolan has got a goal every game so far. The Borough are putting up monster scores without like massive household names in their attack, outside of maybe Bill Sheehan, who we all know coming on for Kilkenny. But it seems to be the fourth quarter, that final little surge that is getting them over the line a lot of the time. And I just think they have greater options coming off the bench. You know now as well, it's one thing putting their 15 down on paper, but who are the finishers? As Jim Gavin always calls them, who are the lads, the Kevin McMenons of this world, that are going to come on and like finish the game, not like keep them in a game. Who's going to come on and finish the game and make a massive impact? And I just think the Borough have the edge in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, we played both of these teams actually in challenge matches earlier this year, and after starting really well against Dicksboro in a challenge match down in Carlow and getting a few goals on the board and that type of thing, they actually grew into the game more and more. Ollie Walsh got onto an awful lot of ball, he was poking it around. Killian Buckley, obviously his influence comes into it, and you mentioned all those good subs that they have, but I wonder about the day when the scores don't come to them freely. Will they be able to dig in and get the result? And that's the thing. And maybe you could say the same for O'Loughlin's, because they don't have a Martin Comerford. They don't have that target man that they had for years, where they can be thinking, right, we're struggling to win a ball up front, hit it on top of Goethe and we'll at least win this ball, or at the very least he won't lose it and we'll get a break or whatever. I think it's a really, really tough one to call, because when teams know each other as well as they do, there are no secrets. They all know what to try and shut down. So I think it's going to be a flip of a coin.
It's going to be a tough game. It's definitely, as excitement goes, it's definitely, I'd say it was more likely to be the more exciting of the 2 semi-finals, because we don't have a heavy favourite on either side, whereas on the other game, which we're going to talk about now, like Ballyhale are massive favourites to win that game. Just going back through the records as well, like the Village were the last team to beat Ballyhale in a knockout championship game in that 2017 semi-final, and it's amazing the sequence of events that followed that. Andy Maloney was over them at the time, and I don't know if they were in a bit of disarray or what was going on, but they played an under-21A final against the Village not long after, and the 3 Mullins brothers were dropped for that under-21 final, and somehow they still managed to beat the Village in that final without them. And a club that maybe looked like they were under a bit of pressure, in the sense that there was, it it was like a rope with the seams kind of breaking off. Things weren't happy within the club, and then all of a sudden Henry Shefflin comes in and they haven't been beaten in a knockout championship game since, and they're back-to-back All-Ireland champions. And now James O'Connor has come in, and we talked about how it might be a difficult transition coming in. Expectations are obviously very, very high. He kind of talked on TG Carter the last day after the game that he's seen an unbelievable hunger from them, and that has been replicated, to be fair, in the pitch. They don't look in any way stale. We've talked about them time in the run, and it really, really does look like their time in the run. Colin Fennelly was on fire the last day. While he wasn't banging goals, he was setting them up. TJ, obviously, class act as well. Seriously well conditioned side as well. There's not really anyone you can go at pace wise or fitness wise. They're all really, really comfortable on the ball as well, and they look like they're coming into the semi-final exactly the way they want to be. And it's going to be a stiff task for the Village. The Village have been tipping away nicely under Cheddar Plunkett the last 2 years, beaten in the final last year obviously by Ballyhale, but I'm just not sure if they have that same kind of class available to them. I'm not sure if they know what they're going to get out of certain players on the big day against the big team.
Yeah, not to mention Luke Scanlon looks like he's out with a broken finger. But it's interesting what you mentioned about Ballyhale, and did it look like things were circling the drain in a strange sense after they lost that last semi-final a few years ago? Is there a bit of disarray and all that? And then, like you mentioned, Henry Shefflin comes in, ties it all together. They have Michael Fennelly as a captain as well, who I'm sure everyone in the dressing room looks up to. And like, you'd often hear this thing, and I'd love to get a few comments in from people, especially down around the area, what do they think? But you hear, it's a tough bunch to handle and all that, and if a few lads who might be tough, it might be tough to keep them between the ditches, and I think people know what I mean. Like young lads will be young lads or whatever, but it just doesn't feel like that stacks up, because so many of these players, they're in great shape, like you say. They all look sharp as they come all the time. Adrian Ronan was on during the week, and he was saying that he actually thinks that this Kilkenny team, despite losing Henry Shefflin, despite losing Adrian Mullen for the moment with a cruciate, Michael Fennelly gone, he actually thinks they might be a superior team now than they were 12 months ago. And I think if there was an All-Ireland club title this year, you would not bet against them at all.
No, it's funny, even you mentioned with Adrian Mullen there, and just even to hear James O'Connor's comments that he's back on the pitch with them, not on the pitch with them, but he's on the side of the pitch working with the physio. Doesn't think he'll play a part in the club championship, but he thinks he'll play a part with Kilkenny. That obviously, is a great sign to his head being screwed on and getting back quickly from a cruciate injury, which is obviously a big thing. Actually, funny enough, I believe all the three Mullins brothers have all done their cruciate and have all been operated under Ray Moore in the last couple of years, which is kind of a bizarre injury to hit a household as well. But I know what you're saying, yeah, and I've heard those same things that you have heard, and that things, that some players can be troublesome and it can be difficult. But it doesn't. They definitely seem to have their heads screwed on at the moment, and they're going to be very, very hard beaten. As you said, Luke Scanlon is out with a broken finger. The likes of Keane Kenny and Conor Brown, who have kind of dominated games so far for the Village, you wonder if they will be able to dominate this sort of a game against a big time opposition. Ballyhale were much too strong for them in the county final last year, particularly towards the end of the game, and. Yeah, it is very, very hard to see past Ballyhale with the best will in the world. Jim Stevens are ticking away nicely, but you just don't think that they're going to be able to put up a score and at the other end shut them down to the 115, 215 that they're going to need to beat them, and it'll be Ballyhale by a handful for me.
Yeah, I'd agree there. The relegation final is also on this weekend. So the semi-finals were played last weekend. Tullaroan saw off Danesford 119 to 112, and Aurora Inistioge after extra time beat out Greig Ballycallan 224 to 413. So that means we've Danesford against Greig Ballycallan here. And the big question is, Richie Hogan, he didn't feature for Danesford last week. Will he this week? Because obviously, such as his quality, that can be the winning and losing of the game.
Yeah, and it's the week between the two relegation semi-finals and the final will not suit him as well. Like if he'd had another week, he would have had a great chance. And we talked about it on the Monday show. Danesford had gone from a hair's breadth away from being in a quarter final and been so safe obviously for another year to now be in a relegation final. They obviously ran out of steam against Mullinalavat that day. Richie Hogan, I'm sure, gave absolutely everything that day, and the extra time would have taken a lot out of him. I think he'd 7 or 8 from play that day, 7 from frees. He missed last week. This game really does hinge on whether he plays or not. If he plays, it's a 50-50 game. If he doesn't, it's probably a 75-25 game in Greg Ballycallan's favour. You wonder if he plays. How fit he will be as well, and whether he will be able to be the dynamic self that he was against Mullinalavat. And with Billy Ryan and a couple others back fit for Ballycallan, I'd say you'd probably be favouring Ballycallan. There's just there's less question marks hanging over them, I'd say. Like, I'm not saying Danesford are a one man team or anything like that, but if Richie is missing, it's very, very hard to see them winning that game.
Yeah, and Adrian Ronan goes into plenty of depth in this game because he did manage Danesford for 4 years, and he's from Greg Ballycallan. To be fair now, he did say that Billy Ryan has been struggling with injury, so he mightn't be at 100% either. So maybe it's fairly finely poised. We'll move on to the Wicklow semi-finals. A former Wicklow hurler you are, so you know the area pretty well. Carnew Emmets are against Aero Greystones, and Bray Emmets are there against St. Pat's. So we'll start off with Carnew Emmets against Aero Greystones.
Yeah, Greystones is a mad one because they were under pressure coming into their last group game, and they were playing Glenealy, which Glenealy would have been seen as favourites going into that. Greystones had to win by 5 points to get through. They won by 6. Anto O'Byrne got a goal in the last minute, which put Greystones through and put Glenealy out. This in spite of Glenealy beating Bray earlier on in the championship. So, like, them being Glenealy is a massive kind of feather in their cap, I suppose. They're going in here. Carnew would be favourites. Carnew managed by James Hickey from Mount Leinster Rangers. Greystones are managed again by Eamon Scallon. It's a funny one. I always think the funny. Eamon Scallon is the Wicklow manager, obviously the former Wexford hurler who famously got sent off in the 96 All-Ireland final, but he's also the Greystones manager as well. So I often wondered, like, I never chatted the lads too much about it, but I often wondered, like, when he's getting fairly riled up on the sideline with Greystones, he's obviously encountering a lot of his county players, and you've shouted abuse or said something to an opposition manager or said something. No, never. No, well I have at different stages, and I just wonder what the demographic is like there in the line when it gets fairly hepped up, because he is looking at them again every time he comes back to county duty, and we'll be looking at them later this year, like in a month. They'll be back training in 4 or 5 days time, which is a bit of a kind of a bizarre scenario too. Carnew will be favourites because Greystones probably haven't produced enough consistently over the last while. Greystones, as I said, they have Anto O'Byrne, Billy Cuddy, Peter Keane, Stephen Kelly, and the likes of these. But Carnew would still be favourites. Carnew have been consistently in finals over the guts of the last decade, and will be favourites there. And in the other game then it's Bray against St. Pat's. Bray are obviously reigning champions. They kind of bounced back well from being beaten by Glenealy earlier in the championship. They're managed by another Wexford man, Paul Cardy. You'd often see a lot of the managers in the Wicklow Championship are former Wexford hurlers, just given how close proximity is to Wexford. Bray had the likes of Christy Morehouse, very good free taker, very good from play. Owen McCormack, Porrick Dial as well. They'd be kind of leading the way there. They're a strong side. I definitely would have them as favourites here against St. Pat's. St. Pat's they'll need a big game from Andy O'Brien up front. Obviously the talisman with Wicklow. They're managed by Ray Nolan, and Andy's brother George will be one of their better forwards as well. Bray are less reliant on a couple of their big men, and I think they will be stronger in the wings and corners than Pats would, unless Andy has a big game and shoots something like 2-8 and gets a brace of goals or something from play. I'd find it hard to see Pats winning. It'll be relatively tight, but I'd still see Bray coming through by 4 or 5 in that.
We'll move on to the Cork Senior Hurling Championship now. Couple of big games this weekend. Sarsfields against Erin's Own, Blackrock against Douglas, and the Piercing against UCC. We're in knockout territory now, so this is when it gets really interesting. Starting off with Sarsfields against Erin's Own. This is a local derby. There'll be no love lost between these teams. And to be fair to Erin's Own, they recovered well after losing to Blackrock in the first game, and then going well behind against both Bishopstown and Newtown Shandrum, and they got a late goal to win it against Newtown Shandrum. Their manager Mark Bowen, he was talking about the training since then. He said the training since the Newtown game has gone well. Kieran Hero Murphy, he was unavailable for the last game, he's back with us and he brings a lot of experience. Now obviously Erin's Own aren't the team that they were of many moons ago, but they still have a couple of players from like 06, 07 when they won the county titles. Whereas I think SARS, they won 3 from 3 in the group. Daniel and William Carney people will know, Conor O'Sullivan, you know, from the Cork setup over the years. In their last game, Jack O'Connor, Liam Healy, James Sweeney, they all scored well against Ballyhale. So that's I think Sarsfields will certainly be favoured in that game. Moving on then to Blackrock against Douglas. So Blackrock, they beat Bishopstown 4-15 to 18 points. Alan Connolly did a lot of the scoring, Mark O'Keefe got a couple of goals, and Michael O'Halloran, who people would have seen coming on for Cork the last couple of years, seriously athletic looking forward, looks like a promising player. And then Douglas, they beat out Middleton. So that was probably one of the tastiest fixtures in the previous round. And the fact that they got that done, is this going to be Douglas now finally kicking on? I'm very interested to see. Shane Kingston got plenty of scores, Alan Cadigan 5 from play, Brian Turnbull, his identicus sort of younger version coming through, he scored 4, and Owen Cadigan even came up and got a point. So that should be a tasty fixture there to see, can Douglas kick on now?
Yeah, it's funny, like we talked in other counties about the likes of Kilrowan and that, and you just think it's a win. It's a win. They just need a big win to kind of get them moving, maybe get that belief that they can beat one of the big teams. And I think beating Middleton, there's a fair chance that that'll kind of achieve that for Douglas. As you said, like you basically named out 3 inter-county worthy forwards. Like if you're picking a Cork forward line, you'd easily see Kingston, Cadigan and even Brian Turnbull in that forward line over the next couple of years. So you're basically saying that you have 3 inter-county forwards in your attack. They're always going to put up a score. You'd probably be a bit worried about what they could possibly concede at the other end. But this is a big chance for them to kick on. It's probably a 50-50 game realistically, but you're hoping that from a Douglas point of view, that this will just give them that little bit extra. Maybe, I don't know if it's a belief thing or not sure what it is, but just that they can get over the line in a big game. And I definitely will follow this game very, very closely. Of all the games this weekend, this will be one of the ones I'll be most interested in, because you just look at Douglas and you think, yeah, they have a lot of talent all over the pitch, and it's just a matter of putting it all together. And that sort of result and what it will do for them could just push them on. You'd hope that they won't fall flat now, and even if they are beaten, that it's, you know, they're going down fighting by a point or 2 against a good Blackrock side. But maybe that result and the kind of the benefits of it might just push them over the line.
On the face of it, you'd think UCC, as back-to-back Fitzgibbon Cup champions, they would be heavily fancied against Na Piarsaigh, but might be a case that some of the key men for UCC won't actually make this game.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like UCC are heavy favourites. I think they're 1-3 or 1-4, and you're thinking on paper, and you're going through the team that they had the last day, and you're thinking, oh Jesus, you go through Shane Conway, Neil Montgomery, Mark Coleman, Paddy O'Loughlin, and you're thinking, yeah, they're very, very strong. Then you're thinking, obviously Shane Conway will be available and Neil Montgomery will be available. Their clubs are gone out of their championships, or the championships are over in Waterford from Neil Montgomery's point of view. But Mark Coleman and Blarney are out this weekend as well. And it's an interesting one for the club manager. I'm sure he's mad to play with UCC at senior level and try and win a county title. But his club is his club. And I'm sure it's a difficult balancing act for... He's going to either have to be playing 2 games this weekend. I'm not sure the actual scheduling of the games.
And John Kiley wouldn't be too happy with that either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, you know, so it's a difficult one. And then Paddy O'Loughlin, who was centre back, obviously we know him. He's played a good few games at wing back for Limerick, particularly a lot of league games. He was centre back the last day when they obviously dethroned him O'Kelly in a belter of a game. But Kilmallock are playing this weekend, so his priority is obviously Kilmallock.
Just to clarify when those games are on, so Doon against Kilmallock, which we'll talk about in a minute or two, that's on at 5:30 on Saturday, whereas the UCC game is on at 7 o'clock on Sunday.
They've every chance in that respect, but it's not exactly ideal preparation playing a championship semi-final the day before. They're younger men, obviously, and they're of college age, so they'll be probably still relatively fresh the next day. But it also increases the chance of Mark Coleman picking up a knock, or Paddy O'Loughlin picking up a knock. And their club manager, like, how happy when the rest of the Kilmallock lads, if the Kilmallock win at the weekend, when the rest of the Kilmallock lads are going for recovery on Sunday morning, he's going to play a match. And then you get a call on Sunday evening that he has picked up a knock and could be out for the county final. That's a myriad of problems comes into it there.
Sure, John Kiley might set up a roadblock on the road down to Cork. And do you know the other thing too, actually? Let's say he did go and play for Kilmallock on Saturday and then UCC on Sunday. I'd imagine he continues to play centre-back for UCC as he has done in the last couple of years, but he's actually playing the half-forward line for Kilmallock this year. So it'll be an interesting adjustment in the space of 24 hours or so. So we look forward to that one. And Na Piarsaigh, Sean O'Halpine was watching on the sidelines the last day.
Yeah, there was a great picture of him watching their game against the Glen the last day from the stand. I haven't. If anybody watching knows, I'm not sure whether he's involved. I'd imagine he probably is involved in some capacity, or he wouldn't have been up in the stand, or wouldn't have been in at the game. Either that, or he got one of the magic 40 tickets between team and management that a club get. But just interesting to see him there. It was interesting actually going down through the lineup immediately. When I think in the Piarsaigh, I think of an O'Halpine, and it's obviously been a while since an O'Halpine was playing, but it was weird not to see that name amongst the lineup for Na Piarsaigh. Na Piarsaigh, I think UCC would have been vulnerable against somebody else this weekend with the amount of the amount of pressure coming on lads from club managers and different things. I still think even if they're down 1 or 2, I still think they'll have enough to beat Na Piarsaigh.
We'll move into the Offaly Championship, which resumes again this weekend. Sir Kieran against Kilcormac Calahi. So this is a dead rubber really, as Kilcormac are already through. And
a dud rubber, or a dud game, I think you were going to call it.
Yeah, I got caught between two stools there. So Kilcormac are already through, and Sir Kieran can't qualify. So we'll probably move on from that one quickly enough. Now, your own Burr against Coolderry. This is essentially a quarter-final game.
Yeah, massive game. We played last weekend against Sir Kieran, and we played well. It was a good kind of polished display and put up a big score. I think it was 126 or something along those lines. But we've been fairly decimated with injuries because the Sir Kieran game was put back a week. That's only left us with 8 days to prepare for a quarter final, and we're down. It's looking like we're going to be down 3 or 4. The game isn't in Tullamore either; it's out in Banner, which would probably mean it's going to be a lot tighter. Coolderry very, very experienced. Going to be an interesting game. It's going to be a hard game, I'd say, for anybody to call. Just the couple of bodies that we're missing. It's going to give an opportunity for some of our young ones to step up and deliver, and from my point of view, hopefully they will. The other group then very, very interesting as well. Rhinus are the only team that are definitely through, so they've won their 2 games so far. But Belmont are on 2 points, and Ballinamere and Shinrone are on 1 point each, having drawn in the first game. So it's all to play for in those games. If Ballinamere win and against Belmont and the other result goes their way, i.e. Rhinus beat Shinrone, they'll actually go through. But Belmont bounced back very well from being beaten by Rhinus in the first game. Beat Shinrone by 7 points, reasonably convincing. Oisin Kelly was on fire that day. Belmont need a draw or better to go through. And then similarly, Ken Hogan's Rhinus side have looked very, very polished so far, beating Belmont and Ballinamere. But Shinrone can still go through if they beat Rhinus and Ballinamere beat Belmont, and then I think it will come down to score difference between Ballinamere and Shinrone, because they drew already in this year's championship. So it's very, very interesting. The games are fairly evenly poised there as well. So yeah, all to play for there.
The Derry final is on this weekend. Kevin Lynch's are against Schlockneil, who of course are chasing 8 in a row here. If you go back a year ago, these two teams met in the final, and Cormac O'Doherty, he scored 16 points. And then add into that the likes of Brendan Rogers, Chrissy McCaig, Carol McCaig, who's very good at the back. I wonder, I mean, Kevin Lynch's are certainly going to be outsiders here. For Schlockneil, who've been on the road looking for, I'd say they don't want to rest until they win in All-Ireland. They probably don't care which code. But it must be tough on them this year, not looking past this game, but to be thinking, maybe this would have been our year. Some of our players are probably tipping 30, that neck of the woods. We need to make it happen soon. They're going to be massive favourites to win this. They would feel they'd have a good crack at Ulster and at All-Ireland. So it's probably disappointing for them, even at this stage, without having the county title in the bag yet.
No, it definitely is disappointing, because I know, like, even from chatting Chrissy McCaig and a few of the other guys involved there, they get a massive buzz out of preparing for the All-Ireland stages and even the provincial stages, where they go down to Abbottstown and play a Kilkenny team, or they go down to Abbottstown and play a Dublin team. They have to travel at least 2.5 hours probably to get, what would be considered a really high tier kind of club game, someone that can match them. They obviously put up a great show against Ballyhale in the All-Ireland Club semi-final last year. Will they be happy with just winning another Derry title? They're gonna have to be. You'd imagine they are still heavy favourites to win this game, but it's as you say, it's a year probably lost for them in some respects, because how many years can you compete at that provincial and an Ireland level before it eventually tails off? So they're going for 8 in a row, as you say. Kevin Lynch's are going to be up against it. They haven't won a title, I think, since 2011. As you say, top of the roll of honour with 23. Oran McKeever and Tiernan McHugh are kind of their big scorers or whatever. And I think it was interesting as well that the Slaughtneil manager said, now, I think it's great that the Antrim final is on telly. And to be fair, I don't recall any Ulster hurling club final been on telly in recent years. I cannot.
Antrim was on last year.
Say that again?
Antrim was on last year.
Okay, outside of Antrim last year, I can't remember another one. And the Slaughtneil manager, Michael McShane, he'd love it, I'm sure, but he's thinking in an ideal world when he said it would be great if TG4 were to show the Derry final live and let the rest of the country see the quality in that final. The last few years of Kevin Lynch's have made grip and viewing for those that were there to watch it. It's unfortunate, but it's just some of the quality of the other games around the country is outstanding as well. And it is unfortunate for probably more than likely Slaughtneil that they won't get a chance to go on to provincial and Ireland level, but that's kind of the nature of this year. And to be fair, if I was part of a potentially 8 in a row winning team, I think I'd be happy enough, because that's so hard done, regardless of what county you're in, regardless of what squad you have, to keep the motivation levels that high, to remain injury free for that length of time where you can go on a run like that.
Yeah.
I definitely, you'd be fancying Slaughtneil. It'd be tight, but you would be fancying Slaughtneil.
So the Armagh semi-finals are on this weekend. Derrynoose against Middletown and Cuchulainn against Sean Tracy's. Then in Antrim, I've already previewed it with Sambo McNaughton, and you can have a look at that on ourgame.ie. Dunloy will be playing Lochgiel, and the way he put it was quite good. He expects a Rangers versus Celtic type of environment. It's the old money of Lochgiel against the new money of Dunloy, and there are a couple of injuries on both sides, and I think Paul Shields, he's a big injury concern for Dunloy, and then there's a couple of full-backs that might be out for Lochgiel. But very interesting quotes from Liam Watson. People remember him scoring for fun against Coolderry in that 2012 All-Ireland final, scoring 3-7. And he goes, Dunloy's there for the taking. Dick O'Kane, Gregory O'Kane says that's why they're champions and they were meant to go and win All-Irelands. But Lochgiel have been All-Ireland champions. We play a good brand of hurling. We fear nobody. All the talks about Dunloy, they talk themselves up. Fair play to them. They're last year's champions. What it would mean to win on Sunday, ? You'd say it's another championship. I can't wait to get back out there again. Hopefully lift that trophy and go and have a good time with these boys after. So just within that, he'd retired at the end of last season, and we played Lochgiel in a challenge match last year, and Cian O'Callaghan was full back and soundly won their duel. But he's after coming back. He was going to go away from hurling this year, and do you know what he was going to get involved in? Motocross. Of all the things, motocross, which I'd say would be great fun. I mean, dangerous as they come, but very, very good. And he was talking about this in the Irish News, and he goes, when you get to 38, it doesn't get any easier. I had no intentions of coming back. The wife maybe convinced me more than anything. I was in good shape for the motocross, doing a lot of running on the roads, and when they asked me to come back to training, I saw that I wasn't away from the pace at all. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it, but I kept breaking down, and that's where I get down on myself. And it's not as enjoyable when you're training but not getting games. Everybody's asking, where's this boy coming out of retirement? Sure, he hasn't played. Look, I'm out of retirement now. I've one game in me, but I've a lot of work to do to get ready for the final. So he had been injured, and he came back and he did well the last day against St. John's, scoring 1-3. So Liam Watson's still getting it done.
Yeah, in fairness, phenomenal. I even saw he came out of retirement on Twitter there a couple of months ago, I'd say it was, and Buff Egan had it up or something like that. This is a fella who was shooting the lights out for Warwickshire in recent years as well. We had a pools competition in Burr, and you had to pick winners of Division 3B league matches or Division 3A league matches, and all the question was, is Watson still playing with Warwickshire? Because if he was, they were putting down Warwickshire every week. It's hard to lose that class. We talked about in a previous video about having those skills, being able to shoot points, being able to shoot sidelines, having that kind of skill. Even if his legs are on the way in a small bit, and even if he has broke down a bit with injuries, just to have those wrists and know that if you get the ball in your hand, you're probably going to score. If you get a goal chance, you're probably going to score. He definitely has that in the locker. It was interesting listening to Sambo just talking about it, because the passion absolutely oozes out of him, and it oozes out of these lads involved here as well. Very, very tight, very, very tight final. I'd probably be going with Dunley. I'd say just they have the experience, but they also have the youth, whereas Lochiel maybe are a bit longer down the road. But like, depending on the type of day it is, depending on the types of conditions, that can all kind of be an equaliser as well. But yeah, brilliant that it's going to be on TV. It's just there will be, actually, I was going to say it's just a pity there'll be no one there. There will be 400 people there, and it will be a raucous 400 within it, because it always is up there. In fairness, pity that Buff can't go up. Maybe he's going up, and maybe he's one of the 400. I don't know. They'd definitely get their exposure out of it in terms of Snapchat and different social media coverage and that. But yeah, it should be a brilliant final.
Yeah, they'd be more than happy to have Buff in there. Laois this weekend: Clough Ballycollar against Castletown, Rosenallister against Burris Nostri, Kilcotton, Camross against Ballynakill, and Abbey Leaks against Rathdowney Earl. Moving on to Limerick then. So I've done a preview with Jerome O'Connell of the Limerick Leader, so have a look at that. He gives some great insight into these games. Namely that Doon, well, one of the things is that Doon, they're in probably a bit of bother with injuries, because Richie English is obviously out for the season, and then Darragh O'Donovan came off early in the quarter-final win against South Liberties. So if you're down those two players, I mean, Kilmallock are the sort of team that are going to rip you apart, especially with Graham Mulcahy in that forward line.
100%. We talked about it on Monday's show. You can adapt mid-game, and a lad can slip in centre back, and you don't have to tactically maybe think about it too much, and you just go out and hurl. But when you're without your starting fullback, they've already had to adapt their defence to make sure that Richie English's loss isn't, trying to alleviate his loss, I suppose. Now they're bringing in probably a new player centre back as well, which probably either robs you of your best wing back or robs you of your best midfielder. So yeah, you'd imagine like a full strength Doon. We played Doon a couple of weeks ago. They're a good side, very, very good side actually. Pat Ryan, Barry Murphy, and the likes. But when you're missing your two best players, one an all-star and one probably should have been an all-star in Darragh O'Donovan, it's a fair uphill battle now. I'd find it hard to see Kilmallock being beaten there, especially if they show up the same Kilmallock side that we saw earlier on in the first round of the championship when they beat the Pearshig. Yeah,
there's plenty of county quality there. We've mentioned Paddy O'Loughlin already. He'll be in the half forward line. Graham Mulcahy will be buzzing around the forward line. Gavin O'Mahony, former county captain. Paddy O'Brien, he's in there as well. So that, I think definitely you'd have to make Kilmallock favourites there. The others,
and just on that claim as well, like the two semi-finals are really defined by injuries or possible injuries. So like Darragh O'Donovan and Richie English are going to be out for Doon by the looks of things, and a lot of it comes down to whether Aaron Gillan is fit to play or not for Patrick Swell in the other semi-final against the Pearshig. Like if he's not, you'd have to make the Pearshig not overwhelming favourites but strong favourites. If he plays, is it a matter of him playing? Is he fit to play or is he not fit to play? So it's going to be really, really interesting. I think you had seen some Instagram footage where he was in a bit of a cast or had something on his hand, and if he is under pressure, then Patrick Swell will be under pressure.
Yeah, I believe he had hand surgery. But is it like with Na Piarsaigh, it's a clash of a team that had obviously heavyweights in this past decade, 4 Munster titles, 5 county titles, an All-Ireland title, and they've got great players in pretty much every position, and guys who've been involved with Limerick at all different levels. Shane Dowling is now out, of course. Then the Patrick Swell side. Obviously, you're not going to win a county title in Limerick unless you have good players all over the field. But it does come down to the big three, really, which is Diarmuid Burns, Cian Lynch, Hurler of the Year, of course, not so long ago, and Aaron Gillan, who you could well imagine winning a Hurler of the Year at some stage, possibly even later this year. And actually the whole big three idea comes from basketball, and I think it originally started off with, was it LeBron, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh when they were all at Miami Heat about 10 years ago. But anyway, that aside, if Aaron Gillan isn't there, I just don't really see how he can get enough scores. I mean, Kevin O'Brien is up there. He's a great man to run down the centre to get a few scores, that type of thing. But do you have to adjust the team? Do you have to think, okay, maybe we'll move Cian Lynch further up the field? Because it's lovely at the moment the way you have him spread out between the half-back line, Lynch midfield and Gillan up front. It will kind of, if he's not sharp, I'm sure he'll play no matter what, but if he's not sharp, that really does rob them of the focal point of their attack.
100%. And like we talked about Limerick's tactic being centred around Galan. So imagine what Patrick Wells' tactics are being centred around him. And as you said, chances are with a hand injury, unless it's very bad, he probably will play. It could affect his free taking. It could easily affect his touch. He could easily get a slap on the hand. He could be wearing a glove. He mightn't be the same player. You wonder, has he been doing much training this week or in the last couple of weeks? Has he been able to do much? If he hasn't, it makes it very, very difficult. Just with that question mark, like they're not playing an also ran or someone who's a contender. They're playing an Approx side that we know, like with the two Caseys, Mike Casey, Peter Casey, Willow Callahan of News Talk fame, Willow Dunn. And they've got talent all over the pitch. And throw David Dempsey in there into the mix as well, Adrian Breen as well. They've loads and loads of talent. I just think the question marks hanging over Patrick's well would just tip the balance. I probably would have had the balance maybe just in Napiershik's favour anyway, and it just tips it a little further in their favour for me.
Yeah, I think Napiershik didn't go well last year under Michael Ryan, and they started off this season poorly in that first game against Kilmallock on TV under Kieran Birmingham. Weren't that good, and obviously Shane Dowling said afterwards about that the players probably weren't hungry enough for it. But they have settled a bit since and beat Ballybrown by double scores 26-13 the last day. They have a game under their belts more recently than Patrick's well, who probably haven't played for a month now because there was that 3-week break. I think you'd have to go with Napiershik and just get that sense that, right, they're going to find their flow again this year and probably atone for last year. So I'd just about go with them too.
Just what you said there, Patrick's well, in a way we talked about it as a possible negative, them been waiting like the Munster hurling champions, waiting 5 or 6 weeks for a game. It's probably been a positive in many respects because they've had a chance to get Aaron Galan back. It's been a positive from that respect. But I'd say for the rest of the players, it's been a slight negative because they might just not be at that same pitch. Like Limerick weren't at the pitch last year in the All-Ireland semi-final for a long time, having sat out watching other games go on as they were waiting in a semi-final. So I just think that a lot of things add up there to see Napiershik winning this by 4 or 5, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, so in the Mayo final then, Turin are against Ballyhale, and between them they've won the last 6 titles. Turin are going for 4 in a row. Ballyhale had 3 in a row before that, then lost the finals in 17 and 18. Some of the key players for Turin would be, who are of course nicknamed the Blue Devils. Shane Boland, he hit 7 points last year in the final. Fergal Boland scored 3. But obviously Mayo is a massive football county, and we've kind of touched on this before, but I did an interview with Fergal Boland, who's a Mayo panellist in football, and he was just talking about Turin, and he was saying it's mad, but people here are stone cracked for hurling. They would be very supportive of me playing football for Mayo, wishing you well at Mass or whatever. But once the hurling season comes on and the county final in October comes, they're mad for it, and the hurling is definitely number one for the people in Turin. Myself and my brother Shane live about 5 minutes from the pitch, and there is someone down there every evening, even in the winter, on go the lights, and you'd be pucking. A message goes out in the WhatsApp group, and you could have everyone down. It's a great social thing, and it's always good crack.
Yeah, it's good. It's great to hear. It's great to actually you think about it, and you see it, little bits and pieces there. But it's great to hear people saying it, and I think Fergal Boland's really interesting one actually, because one of the reasons he ended up on the Mayo under-21 football squad was at the start of the year, the manager did a thing where he got people to write down on a piece of paper if there was anybody not on the panel that they thought should be on the panel. And Fergal Boland's name came out about 15 or 20 times, and he ended up being drafted into the under-21 panel and subsequently ended up on the senior panel. But it's funny, he probably would have maybe skipped under the radar a small bit because he's probably a hurling man. First and foremost, I would say. They've got, obviously, Carl Freeman is involved in the final as well. He's training to be a doctor down in UL. He obviously soloed a slitter 42 kilometres around a tiny little circle in his back garden down in Limerick, switching every 10 or 15 times, I think, before he got vertigo. But just goes to show you, I think whoever sponsors his club were going to give them 42 drinks or something on the house or something like that, one for every kilometre he did. So maybe the pubs won't be back open this weekend, but if they win the county title, they might be able to have a night back in that pub in a week or two. But obviously Keith Higgins is going to be a massive one as well. We know that he's it's hard to know. I'd like to actually chat him to see whether he would consider himself hurling or football predominantly if he had to make the question. But he did go back and won a league title with Mayo just a couple of years ago. It's going to be an interesting final. Ballyhale had 3 in a row before losing finals in 17 and 18 and are looking to get back up to the top again. But an interesting game, and no more than Antrim, no more than Derry, there's mad absolute pockets of hurling up there where they're just die hard into the game, and great to hear stuff like that. Like, I know that, like, that's, I'd say the situation that Fergal Boland has talked about there is replicated in clubs around the country. You might think, I'll go down for a few pucks there, meet one of the lads. All of a sudden, it's in a WhatsApp group. There's 20 lads down there, and there's a mad game of one touch going, or you're baiting ball up between 10 lads, and lads are pulling and swinging, and so that's what it's all about, really.
Without doubt. And I remember talking to Keith Higgins at an All-Star tour, I think in 2014, and I got the sense definitely that hurling is a big one for him and hurling for Ballyhaunis. And if I remember correctly, I do think that hurling was his sort of first love, but either way, he's very good at both of them, so best of luck to him and also to Turin. The Meath quarter-final are on this weekend. Kilmessan against Kildalkey, Nafina against Longwood. In Monaghan, the final is on there. Castleblaney are against Trua. Castleblaney have won 17 of the last 21 finals and beat Trua well last year. So, and you're reckoning that Trua haven't, last year was their first final appearance, haven't won it?
Yeah, to my reckoning, they haven't, unless the club was under a different name or it was an amalgamation or something like that. To my reckoning, they haven't won a Monaghan senior title, and last year was their first final appearance. Castleblaney were in an All-Ireland Club semi-final a couple of years ago, I remember, possibly at junior level, maybe intermediate. I'm not 100%, but they're obviously the really, really dominant kind of club up there. To say 17 out of the last 21 is unbelievably impressive. Then you move on to Roscommon. The semi-finals are this weekend. Four Roads, obviously, who would be synonymous with Roscommon hurling, they go up against that league. Then you have Tremaine against Pádraig Pearses. Then in Sligo, we have semi-final stage there as well. It's great when it's coming down to this stage. Everything is it's really, really exciting. All the silver, you can see it just at the end of the tunnel, and it's been a long tunnel. The tunnel's been a long way away. But it's Naomh against Coolra Strandhill and Easky against Western Gales. And Tyrone is an interesting one as well this weekend. You've Old Carrickmore against Dungannon Owenrua. This is the 9th consecutive final meeting between this pair. Dungannon have won the last 2, but were beaten in the 4 before that. So you can imagine the outpouring of emotion when they did actually make it 5-time lucky and beat them. Some interesting little side stories from that final. John Devlin, who plays in goals for Dungannon, he's still going strong with the Tyrone hurlers at 44. 26 years since he made his debut. I think he lost the number 1 shirt last year, and he was adamant that he would try and win it back or do his best to win it back. And Damien Casey is still running the roost for Dungannon. Every Monday, when you look in the Independent or any other paper and you look at the true league fixtures, you're seeing Damien Casey 112, Damien Casey 115, puts up massive scores every weekend. And that's another county final on a really, really busy weekend where they're all knockout games, and there's a lot of silver on the line in all these games as well.
And we decided to finish things up, we'd introduce a new little segment this week, which is the bet that you think will come through this week. So it's very much Smooth Verney's Lock of the Week.
Lock of the Week.
Yeah, inspired by Simpsons.
This is not like there's been other weeks when I fancied more teams and would maybe put in an accumulator, but I'm not going to give 2 or 3 teams just for the sake of it. I've just picked one team this week. My lock of the week is Dixborough to qualify against O'Loughlin Gales. They're 5-4 to qualify. So I think it's much safer than backing them at 11-8 to win the game in 60 minutes, given the fact that the last 2 times they played them in the league finals, they've won after either extra time or penalties. And it was a tight game when they played them in the semi-final 2 years ago. I just think they'll have a bit too much juice in the legs coming in off the bench. The likes of Martin Gaffney coming in, putting over 3 or 4 points. Killian Buckley's been absolutely phenomenal for Dixborough this year so far. Ollie Walsh has been massively influential as well, and Bill Sheehan up front. And I just think when you combine that with the injuries that O'Loughlin's have, I just don't think they have the same strength in depth. And I fancy Dixborough to get it done. And I think at 5-4 to qualify, I think it's safe. You're covering yourself. You're covering yourself with any potential draw or that as well. So while I haven't given an accumulator, if lads are putting together accumulators, I think Dixborough at 5-4 to qualify will fairly boost the odds of any other accumulators you're doing.
Okay, and we'll keep the old smooth Verney's lock of the week going in the future. That's kind of it for us, Michael Verney. So brought to you by Slattery Sullivan Insurances. Once again, if you want to get a new business quote, call 067 56705 and you get 10% off with the reference our game. Thanks very much, Michael.
Cheers, Shane. Good man.